Logos can do more harm than good, for
Right.
sure. Because a bad logo, everyone will notice. A good logo, no one will notice. And so you just need to make sure that you're focusing on the words that actually communicate what you do.
Welcome to the Thrive Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Potter, and I'm dedicated to guiding founders and entrepreneurs in the tech space to along their path to success. So let's dive into our blueprint for success. Today we'll be exploring the intricate realm of branding, especially within the tech sector. I'm with two branding aficionados, Pete DiSalvo and Clay Vaughan, to share their insights. Clay, when reflecting on standout tech brands, what would you say the core attributes that truly set them apart?
Ooh, that is a great question to kick off this episode with. Well, ultimately, with any business, I truly believe that the ones that are the most successful from a branding perspective are the ones that think about their consumer. I mean, are they just trying to put a message out, or are they trying to solve a problem? Are they trying to actually speak to the tangible need that their customer is facing? Because I think in many cases, especially in the tech space, the founder, the original group that was core to the success of an organization, well, they were focused on the product because they were passionate about the product, because they loved the product. But if they don't actually realize, hey, well, how is this product actually brought to market? How is this product actually serving our customer? Well, it's going to be a complete failure because it's going to be shelved and they're not actually going to make any headway. So when you think about really successful brands, I mean, when you think about those big tip-top tech companies out there, I mean, it's truly based off of customer experience, and the brand plays such a critical role in that. And I don't want to get too far into the conversation because I'm sure you've got many more questions. And I'm sure Pete can speak to this quite a bit. But when it comes to the brand, I think the natural tendency is to think, especially among newer business owners and entrepreneurs, the natural tendency is to think, I just need a great logo and a nice website that's beautifully designed, and I need to run some ads if it's a B2C thing. If it's a B2B thing, well, they're going to be kind of stuck because most people don't really know how to market on a B2B side. And so when that happens, I mean, you end up wasting a lot of money and you end up getting stuck. But the problem is, like, that's not the approach. And I'll just kind of put a pause button on that because I think I could talk for a few hours on that.
Oh, I'm sure you
subject.
could.
So,
Pete, along those same lines, clearly Data Capable is an industry leader with its products. How do you create a situation where your tech products stand out from the competition?
Yeah, my background's not in marketing or branding, it's engineering, but I've always had an eye for good design in recognizing brands as I see it. Back in my development days, I had to learn to do that because I was creating websites without a designer, and I could never create it myself. So I'd borrow ideas from different places. So I really appreciate what you do for a living, but I felt also targeted by the way you started, because it's totally true, where brand was an afterthought. Like, let's get this product, let's provide value. Then it became like, oh, well, it's more than just a logo. It's like a feeling. And when people see our logo, we want them to feel something and to feel connected to it, and remind them of us as a team, not just a product.
Great. Clay, when you consider the diverse audiences in the tech sector, how do you compare and contrast the branding approach between B2B and B2C approach in the markets?
So I think when you're trying to position yourself, obviously you need to figure out what the end goal is. I mean, with any project, you always want to start with the end in mind. Otherwise, you're never going to actually get there. But when you're thinking about branding a newer business, maybe you're sub 2 million in revenue. I mean, you've seen some success, and you're thinking, all right, now we need to grow. whether you're in B2B or B2C, you start with the end in mind and you think, okay, well, who is going to be utilizing this? Who is our customer? What are the tangible problems that they're facing? What is it that they need as it relates to my product that I'm bringing to market? And if you can nail those down, then you clearly articulate a message on your website, in your brochures that you're dropping off at your potential businesses. I mean, wherever you're going to be bringing your product to market, you've got to be speaking specifically to those problems and making it super clear that you get it.
Pete, that probably resonates with you quite a bit, considering that your product portfolio, some of it is strictly B2B and other parts of it is B2C. How do you compare that to what Clay just said?
Yeah, B2B is interesting. It's usually they have more of a budget. It's usually more focused on relationship as well, where B2C is less about the relationship and I would say typically transactional or mostly transactional. And that kind of shifts things a little bit in how we want to present ourselves as a brand and communicate. So that's a big difference for us. And then there's also the aspect that B2B typically I'd say is a very small niche, or like we're targeting a smaller group. Whereas if we were B2C, we may have to appeal to a lot more people. And that would really change things too.
Great. Clay, looking back at growth trajectories of several tech companies, you briefly touched on the significance of how branding shifted from a startup phase to an established phase. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So I think if I can just level with anyone listening in today, when you're approaching your messaging, regardless of the stage of growth that you're in, I would encourage you to really just spend some time and articulate a clear message, because ultimately I don't think it's going to change based off of what stage of growth you're in. Because if your product solves a problem, well, it's going to solve the same problem it solved for when you were a teeny tiny company to where you are a thriving, successful, really big company. So what I would just give some tangible advice on is when you think about your message, I want you to sit down and I want you to write out who your ideal customer is, whether it's a B2B or a B2C. Write out who your ideal customer is and put some parameters in that. Who are they? What's their background? What's their family life like? What are the key motivators that would really make your product interesting to them? And then once you've identified that customer, really understanding who they are, I want you to think about that tangible need. What is the want that they have? What are they aspiring to accomplish? What are they hoping that their lives will look differently? How are they hoping their lives will look differently after they use your product? Write that down. And then what you'll do is you'll then figure out what's stopping them from getting that and how is that making them feel. Because to your point earlier, I mean, when you're dealing with two different kinds of buyers, you're dealing with a transactional and you're dealing with a relational buyer. But the reality is each of those buyers has a problem and they're hoping that your product is going to solve it. And once you've done that, you give them a clear reason as to why you are uniquely qualified to help them get what they want. Why is your product so good? Why is it such a valuable tool or resource for them? Or maybe it's an entertainment thing. Depending on what part of the tech sector you're in, you've got to make sure that you're clearly identifying those key elements, those key parts of your product that really changes lives. And then from there, you give them a path to engage with you. Narrow it down to 3 easy steps. Say, hey, look, this is what you have to do to get started, and this is what your life is going to look like when it's all said and done. And then you call them to act. So having a clear brand message is ultimately going to be what scales a business. I mean, just in my own clients' history, we took a financial tech company to market last year, and I mean, literally went from 0 to hundreds of thousands of customers within one day. I mean, it was insane, and it was all tied to messaging. I mean, it's crazy because there wasn't really anything else that would have motivated an engagement. I mean, in this case, people were having to switch banks. Like, that's not an easy move. Yet we clarified how easy it was to change banks. It was a click of a button, and we articulated the value of making that decision and the authority that we had. And that's why we hit a 30-day launch goal on day one. And so, I mean, for all intents and purposes, when it comes to that scaling trajectory, doesn't matter where you are in that path, you've got to clarify your message, because that's truly what your brand is. Your logo is super important for sure, because that's kind of that stamp that someone gets in their mind. But what is even more so is, what does that logo mean? And I think that's what Data Capable has done a great job on. And it's exciting to see what's on the horizon.
Yeah, and I can't stress that enough, where simplifying is so beneficial. In the very early days, I try to explain to my mom, what does Data Capable do? And she's like, I have no idea. And, it was years before, like, all right, I got it. I can say it like very simply and clearly. And that's when I feel like we really nailed it with my mom first. And now it's simple concept that everybody can understand. Our target audience can understand.
That's terrific. With regard to Data Capable, right along the same lines of what Clay was talking about, you've lived the startup phase, and now you're in the established phase. Can you take me a little bit on the journey of how Clay described that specifically regarding Data Capable?
Yeah, it's a journey, and the way you described it is the ideal scenario, and that's what I'm thinking about, or what I was thinking about the whole way. And it sounds simple, like, we'll just do that. We'll just ask them, what is the value we provide? And then they'll just tell us. But it's not always that simple. And it takes time in iterating and communicating, asking questions different ways. The customers aren't always right at our fingertips. And we don't want to be a burden and ask a lot from them constantly. So it's a long process to really narrow in over time and answer those questions ultimately. But it takes time.
It does.
So, Pete, when it comes to just kind of how y'all have approached over the years, how have you seen kind of your message shift? I know you mentioned your mom, but I mean, how have you seen that message shift? And do you feel like that was kind of as a result of just this reality check? Oh, this was originally a product that was developed by some really smart science. I think, I mean, you mentioned in a previous episode, scientists. I mean, taking all of that very complex ideology and boiling it down into just a simple, hey, here are our products, and this is how we describe them.
Yeah.
What was that process like?
We were really disjointed early on, where it's these products with a bunch of features, and we're selling features. We weren't selling value, which was a big shift. And it was disjointed, where all right, we sell this product to these people, but this one to these people, and they're totally different audiences. And we needed to really hone in on what is our ideal client and what is the value all of these have in common. And that's how we narrowed it down to delivering situational awareness when it matters most. And it will continue to evolve. And I think that's part of branding that's important, is this isn't Data Capable forever. We need to evolve over time and shift focus, not necessarily change, but improve over time.
And I know, Bill, you've got some questions you want to
No,
ask too,
take
but
your time.
this is so good. So one thing you mentioned earlier was it takes time to just kind of figure it out.
Yeah.
And just to kind of jump off of the question you asked earlier, ultimately, I think the key success metric for anyone trying to scale their organization is how quickly you can get over those hurdles. Because obviously, it could take 2 years. It could take, one of my clients took them 70 years to finally get a clear message, which is crazy. It went through 3 generations and they finally got a clear message. But the reality is, and one of my mentors, he uses this analogy, and he said it's often hard to read the label from inside the box.
Yeah.
And when you're so focused on your product, it's so hard to see what others see outside looking in. And so when you can bring in a third party, and this is why I'm in business, is when you can bring in a third party to come and help you read that label and say, hey, look, no, all those features, all those benefits, no one cares. No one cares about your story either. Everyone cares about what you can do to help them.
Yep.
That's it. Unfortunately, that's it.
Yeah.
So ultimately, if you want to scale and you want to really shrink that timeline, you've got to make sure you're bringing in partners to actually help you overcome those hurdles. And I know you've done that, and Bill, you've done that as well, very successfully.
Number of times.
Yeah.
Yeah, part of what was, I guess, maybe scary is not the word, but in this journey, we were bootstrapped, so we were dependent on revenue from customers and afraid to say no because we need the cash to continue not only growing but surviving. And with that came like, well, we don't want to commit to like this specific profile. We kind of want to do them all, but ultimately we realized we have to. We can't please everybody. We have to really hone in on that ideal client.
Clay, the tech landscape is packed with brands clamoring for attention. I really enjoyed that story. I thought it was valuable about the banking client that you were able to transform their client acquisition. Could you share another unique strategy or campaign that genuinely made a brand shine through the competition?
All right. That's a good question. Let me think about that for a second. I'll say this: when it comes to,
I've got a good one. I can
If
into.
you, well, I'm thinking through that question. If you want to take
not
it.
necessarily technology, but the car brand Kia. Years ago, when I was 16, nobody wanted a Kia. It was like a horrible car, and they've completely transformed their brand. So now you see the Kia logo, and it's cool. And it took a lot of work and effort and marketing and branding to get there, but they did it, and it's impressive.
No, that's great. Thank you for giving me that break to really think about that question. So yeah, I don't know why this didn't pop into my mind instantly. So one of our clients, they have a very let's just put it this way: they're always outside in the woods. They're in the hunting space. I mean, they're very much focused on anything but technology. And so when they came to us, they were like, how do we take all of our products and make them accessible? And we had to develop an entire tech stack for this specific client because, I mean, we're factoring in growing rates and all of that kind of stuff for their product because they were selling trees and shrubs and, I mean, on a massive scale. And the success that they saw was, I mean, insane. Not only did we help them take what they had to market. I mean, they're on a 20,000 acre property, and that they had to take all of that content and put it into something that was digestible in a space that, frankly, no one's ever really tried. I mean, you're dealing with big brands like Mossy Oak and Realtree, which I don't know if y'all are hunters at all, but those are the big ones. And in Texas, everybody knows those brands. And so in this case, we were dealing with a lot of different personalities, a lot of different people trying to make this brand successful, and ultimately we far surpassed their goals within the first year of launch. And like I said, we launched tech stack, TV show, all that kind of stuff, and it was a huge success. So I think the key example from that and takeaway for anyone in the tech space is think through what is it that you can do to get in front of your customer. And that's what we were really successful in, is we were able to get in front of every single one of their customers across the country through a very successful and broad approach. So it was anywhere that those people were engaging, whether it was television or online or in print magazines, we got in front of them, and we did it in a very affordable way for these guys. Because, I mean, they didn't have $100 million budget, even though that's what their competitors had. And we took it to market, and now they're the top in the industry. So,
and that reminded me of something. So it's important to transform your brand I would say, if you need it. But it's also important to look at the other aspect of don't transform your brand because you're getting pulled in that direction. And I think of brands like Carhartt who've stayed true to their mission and their values, which is gear for people that actually working or being outside. And as soon as celebrities wear it, now everyone has, like the Carhartt hat. It's like the beanie is their biggest selling product. But they've stayed true to what they actually create and provide as a brand, and that has like increased the popularity.
Yeah.
Quality material for people outdoors, but anybody can wear it at this point.
Clay, Pete makes a great point. Brands must evolve, but also remain true to their essence. How do you believe companies should strike a balance between that and especially as market dynamics change?
So the question is really just how do they stay true to their brand message? Well, I think the very easiest way to answer that is they need to establish a mission and write it down. I mean, why are they on planet Earth? Why do they exist? Money, as much of a great thing it is, it's a terrible goal because you're gonna reach that goal and you're gonna be like, that wasn't enough. So you want to make sure that you have a good, clear mission that you as an organization are trying to accomplish. I love Tom's, the shoe company. I think they do a great job of clarifying what their mission is. And that's why when you buy a pair of shoes from them, they're always going to donate another pair of shoes to someone who doesn't have shoes. And so when you buy from them, you're not just buying into the fact that these are really uncomfortable shoes. I don't know if y'all have ever worn Tom's, but I don't know why anyone wears them. But what I will say, I'm sure I'm going to get some emails about that. But the reality is, like, when people are buying a product, they're going to pay a premium if they feel like they're engaging in the same mission that you're on. And so with Carhartt as an example, I mean, with any major brand, that mission is important not just for your customers, but for your team, and making sure that is all cohesive. Like for me, I mean, my personal mission is to impact the world for good in all that I do. And so that tends to bleed into the rest of my team and therefore into what my clients are involved in as well. And so I think the main thing here is just write it down very clearly. I mean, if you want to put it on a wall, you can put it on a wall, but the key here is you've got to get it written down. And that's going to be what is kind of that guiding force.
That was one of the things, I met you some time ago, and you have been an absolute evangelist for staying true to your mission.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like Clay's saying, your mission pulls together your audience externally and represented by your brand, but it's also a really important piece of your internal team. And when you're hiring talent these days, money isn't always going to give you the advantage you're looking for. Benefits won't necessarily do it, but it's the mission that attracts people and keeps them within your organization. And you could probably argue the same for customers. Like your brand is what's keeping them interested too.
Yeah, your purpose, your mission, your cause, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
it is so important, and it is very different from your niche, or niche, however you want to say that word. Your niche, that is what you do. Your purpose, your mission, your cause. That is why you do what you do. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Clay, as you know, I've been involved in a lot of merger and acquisitions. From a broader business perspective, especially during an M&A, how have you seen branding aspects influence decisions during an M&A process?
Oh, they're so critical. If you don't have a solid brand, guess what? You're not going to be valued as much as you want to be valued at. So in my own experience, selling companies, building and selling companies, the ones that sold for the top dollar were the ones that had the strongest brand. And when I say brand, in regard to strength, it's clarity of what we do. It's reach. So how many people are actually talking about you? And you can figure that out online very quickly. And it's tied to, like, what is your overall impression of that brand? Do you have positive reviews or do you have negative reviews? All of those are so critical to you getting the top dollar for your sale. So I'm going to turn that question right around on you. How have you seen that, Bill, in your own experience?
Oh gosh, mergers and acquisitions is a very complex subject, and so you have to carefully consider the acquirer's brand first, and is there a synergistic impact? Reason that most companies do mergers and acquisitions is because they're acquiring revenue. They're acquiring new logos that they can cross-sell into. They're acquiring technology. So those are all very important considerations. But the brand, when you merge two companies together and they're both well-known in the industry, like the utility industry, are you trying to serve, what segment are you getting as an advantage? Are you, with my previous company, we would look at typically acquiring companies that would go down market because our brand was exceptional in the enterprise space. But we were not really that well known in the smaller B2B space. And so by specifically targeting companies that had that exceptional brand awareness in the smaller, it allowed us to penetrate deeper into that industry.
Wow. So what do you think was kind of like the main lesson learned from that entire experience?
Oh, gosh. I guess the main one was that as you're focusing on developing your own brand, you're really cognizant of the great companies that are out there that have also focused, within their segment. And, as you said, setting a financial goal is not the best goal because where do you go from there? It's really about bringing the effective solutions that you've developed in one segment to another segment.
Yeah, and that I think social proof is a big part of that, where if you have a following, you look cool, that might get you in the door with an investor. That's the surface level, and you need a lot more than that, but that could open doors just to have that presence.
Yeah.
Pete, trust is a trusted commodity, and you obviously data capable. You've developed it into a very trusted brand. In your view, how should tech brands navigate, the radical branding, positioning changes without alienating your audience?
That's a really tough question, and you do need to adapt your brand over time. And I don't believe you should identify your brand and stick to that forever. Like, you need to grow, maybe increase your audience, maybe decrease your audience, but people will come and go along the way. You need to stay true to your mission. And there might be people that drop off, but as long as you have the future in mind and you're heading in that direction, it's okay. And a good example is there was somebody on TikTok, some famous person, and she started doing things a little bit different, and half her audience was pissed and unfollowed her, but she continued to do what she wanted to do, and now she's like recovered from it. But it's like you have to adapt over time, and you may lose some people along the way.
Have you? What's your experience been with that?
I think from an adaptation, is that a word? I don't think that's a
Adaptation?
word. Adaptation.
It's a new word.
It's a new word. Being able to respond to just how the market engages with your product, and being cognizant of what people are saying is important. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. The last thing you want to do is chase after one specific customer segment and just constantly be seeking to please them. We have seen in the past year or two what that does to big brands who decide to appease only one small segment of their audience, and it doesn't look good on the stock market, that's for sure. And so I think the reality is you just need to make sure you stay true to your mission and stay true to what you actually want to be doing as a business.
Yeah, and with that said, I don't think you should make drastic changes. Like your logo, for example, if you improve or change the brand, it should be modified, not completely redone. And similar with the mission or verticals, it should be like tied to the core, something that existed and you built, and not just starting over in a way.
If I can give a great example of what not to do. Are y'all familiar with Calendly?
Yes.
Okay. Are you familiar with their recent logo change? No? Okay.
No.
I'd encourage y'all to go check it out. By far the worst logo change I've ever seen in my entire life, and we're talking about a mega successful company, and they changed it too much. They changed it way too much for the worse. And now all you have to do is just go look up memes about the Calendly change. It was a very bad branding decision. I don't know who on their branding team was involved in that, but it was a major fail. And it was because they just their logo, their first logo was perfectly fine. I think they for whatever reason got tired of it because no one else was saying, "Hey, you need to change your logo." And I think that's another key is you need to focus on what's actually needing to be changed and not necessarily changing it just because a branding guy shows up and says you need a new logo.
Yeah,
and I'm pretty sure that's what happened to them.
I've got a question for you too. So related to like changing your brand or updating it, there's undeniably trends in branding, in design. And for me, it's always difficult to identify what is a trend and what is like the future of design. And how do you think of that when you're creating a brand?
That's a very good question. I mean, you look at like the game changers, Nike, Apple even. You're never going to go wrong by being simple. You're never going to go wrong by approaching your brand with the goal of simplicity and minimalism. When it comes to kind of the I don't know, scripts and all that kind of different fonts that you can use, I think you want to avoid the trends, if anything, because there's a reason why there's a reason why Nike hasn't changed their logo. I mean, I guess Apple kind of did when they changed their colors from Macintosh, but the reality is like they've stuck with it. And I love this question from the standpoint of it has nothing to do with your logo.
Yeah.
I mean, it really doesn't. Your logo is, and there's no scientific study that I can use to back this up, but what I can say is your logo is worth about 2% of your brand. It is important, and you as a team should love your logo. You shouldn't look at your logo and be like, ugh, not that one again. But you should absolutely be focused on the words that you're using to say about your brand. It takes someone 13 times to see a message and retain that message. 13 times. So if you change your message time and time and time again, well, you're just resetting that counter for your audience to be branded. And so you've got to have a simple message. You've got to have a very clear utilization of words continuously, where you're not changing those words all the time. And that's actually what I think is far more important than any logo. So logos can do more harm than good, for sure. Because a bad logo, everyone will notice. A good logo, no one will notice. And so you just need to make sure that you're focusing on the words that actually communicate what you do.
Well, I'm curious, along those lines, Elon Musk recently changed Twitter to X. Could you give me your expert branding opinion
My
on
expert
that?
branding? There's a certain stage in life where you could just do whatever you want. And I'm pretty sure that's where Elon is at, because he's got, the reality is, Tesla, I mean, all that he's doing with Starbase and all that kind of stuff, like, really, when you say all of those things, you actually think of Elon Musk. So all of these are actually branding tools for Elon Musk's brand. So I think that he's doing a killer job. I think he's probably made some bad decisions from an investment standpoint. But I mean, like I said, when you get to a certain point in life, you can get away with a lot. But when we're talking about a startup tech company, you don't have the luxury that Elon Musk has. Yeah. So.
Well, and that brings me to another point. You are a branding expert, and with our world becoming increasingly digital, how do you weigh the importance of digital branding against more traditional avenues of branding in the tech sector?
So when you say traditional avenues, what do you mean by traditional avenues?
Branding avenues.
Okay, got it. Okay, so ultimately, everyone's online right now. And if you're in the tech sector, guess what? You're online too. So the reality is, like, you've got to have the majority of your emphasis where your customer is. So wherever they are, that's where you need to be. And so if you've got a huge budget, sure, you can go the traditional routes. But I have this conversation with folks all the time. in fact, I was sitting across the table from the VP of branding for Chick-fil-A, and he actually was the one who created the logo for Chick-fil-A, and he was saying this common mantra, which most people in marketing have heard, which is about 50% of your marketing works and about 50% of your marketing doesn't work. And as soon as you figure out which 50% is which, let me know. I think that's a traditional form of marketing because there's very few metrics that you have to gauge success. Whereas with digital, you have so much more. Now, obviously, with privacy laws on the horizon, and even already engaged with email tracking not being as accurate as it once was, you still have so much more opportunity for understanding how people are engaging with you when you're doing digital. So if you've got a small marketing budget, I'd recommend you lean more into the digital campaigns because you want to be very hyper-focused with those, and you want to make sure that it's working. And if you don't know what your conversion rate is on your website, if you don't know what your click-through rates are on your ads, if you don't know what your behavior is like when someone's engaging with your brand, well, you're probably going to waste a lot of money on marketing. So traditional avenues, which in my space would be things like magazine buys, press, all that kind of stuff. You want to avoid paying for that and do that as organically as you can. So yeah, get yourself featured in an article that's published within Forbes. You want to have that kind of publicity, but you don't want to be investing your marketing budget into that if you can avoid it.
Bill, can I add a follow-up question to that? So something I've been thinking about is where Data Cable is B2B and our customer are utilities mostly. So there's trade shows, there's some publications, a few things that are specific to utilities, but all these people go home, they use social media, they're on YouTube, they're everywhere else as well. And I believe we can target them everywhere if we can really hone in on how do we target them outside work. Because obviously we're targeting a utility conference. We know they're there.
Yeah.
What about when they're home? And maybe that's the science that we haven't figured out yet. But like, what is your perspective on B2B selling through these channels when people aren't working?
Yeah. Well, I actually, I mean, I understand the terminology of B2B and B2C and why it's necessary to use, but whether it's B2B or B2C, it's actually H to H. You're selling to humans.
Yep.
Whether you're selling a business product or you're selling a consumer product. I would say that you can absolutely take advantage of the fact that, hey, look, these folks showed up to this conference, and I know exactly who they are. I've got their email addresses. I can retarget them. I can do all of that. But you just need to make sure that you're actually giving value.
Yeah.
Because most government employees, most utility employees who are 9 to 5, they're not founders. So founders, we're thinking about our businesses all day long, whereas someone who's a 9 to 5, they're like, I don't want to think about work.
Yeah, you see work in your Instagram feed, and you're like,
no,
what?
thank you.
Now I
get
hate
out of
you.
here.
Yeah.
So that's where you've got a couple different ways you can approach that. LinkedIn is known to be a work thing. So people are not going to be upset with you if you advertise on LinkedIn after hours, whereas Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, that's a place where you're just going to be sharing something that is relevant to them. So instead of saying, hey, sign up for our product today, you could say, hey, are you tired of from the conference too? And you can make something comical.
Yeah.
Comedy sells to the masses. Comedy never sells to an individual higher elite. So you want to make sure that if you're doing something like marketing to someone after a conference, after hours, make it engaging where they're going to remember you instead of just trying to get them to engage with your product.
And provide value.
Yeah,
That's key.
absolutely. Yeah.
As we wrap up our discussion, I'd love to hear from both of you on that exclusive X factor. What truly makes a brand not survive, but thrive, and dominate its, well, as you would say, niche, and you would say niche. But we'll start with you.
Yeah, what is the X factor for success from a branding and positioning front? It's absolutely the words, and I'm probably sounding like a broken record here, but I cannot emphasize it enough. If you don't have words that clearly articulate why you are uniquely qualified to help your customer overcome their problems and get what they want, then you are illegitimate and irrelevant. And so couldn't emphasize it more. That's the X factor. Pete?
And for me, it's the consistency across all functional pieces of the business. So marketing, branding, but sales, the team,
Absolutely.
engineering, your products internally, your advertising externally, having everything simple and consistent, a consistent feel across the board is that X factor. And then I wanted to add one more thing. So when Data Cable hit $1 million in revenue, and maybe like, here it is. So we decided we would tattoo our old logo. This is now our old logo on our arms at $1 million revenue. So I would say this is a bad example of branding, but this was our first one.
Wow,
and
it's a permanent
memorable.
one.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was hard when you decided to change the logo, huh?
Yeah, it was okay. This marks a moment in history.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
those are both great points. In my previous company, it was really our ability to foster a sense of community and belonging among our clients. When they sensed that if they were coming with our company, they were part of an ecosystem that they could trust, and that also permeates the staff too. And so when we're aligned with our values and mission and creating that sense of community and belonging, it was amazing, because the utility industry is so unique compared to other industries, that they all talk to each other because they're not competitors. Mm-hmm. You really need to create that sense of community and belonging, and that has served us well. So, well, thank you again. This has been an exceptionally engaging and thoughtful discussion on branding. And I want to thank the audience for tuning in to another Thrive podcast. If this episode has added value to your journey, please share, subscribe, and leave us a review. I encourage you to visit our website, thriveadvisors.com. And remember, businesses, all businesses from time to time hit a point of stagnation. And we at Thrive Advisors will create a business plan for you and set it in motion and guide you to that successful exit. Until next time, thank you for joining us at our podcast. And thank you, guys.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah.
Great.